Well, good morning, everyone, and it's great to be back. It's great to see such a full house, and yesterday was excellent. Thank you also to General Chris for that great start to the day. It's our great pleasure to be back as sponsors here, but I wanted to also speak on several themes today, which I hope will take away. I've asked for the slides to be in a PDF, which will be available afterwards, so I've been there. You don't want to be noting down some stuff, but I think most of the speakers today are happy for that. And those of you who are watching online as well, sorry you can't be with us here today, but we are making part of the Cycon experience a global one. So I think really from my point of view is to try and get across today two things. It's really to talk about some of the industry perspective, certainly from Fortinet's point of view, but also how we all as an industry family can work together with NATO to make things better. And I'll touch on that introduction there mentioned about the role I have making this work in the UK MOD at the minute. I'll touch on that at the end as well. So I think the first thing to mention is, it was on the panel yesterday, it was said about it's time to let industry take their lead. Now sometimes, and I've been in the military, that can be pretty terrifying because that's not the normal military way. But let's not forget there's precedent here. There's lots of times in big time of conflict where industry does take the lead. Think about the whole industrialization of war in the sort of the middle of the last century especially. That's when things really start to go through the gears. So we can leverage some of that expertise in industry today. So not only Fortinet, but all the great companies that are here and also around the NATO family. But it's also wise to do this. It was Winston Churchill who said that it's a great leader who knows when to step aside and let others take the lead. And that's important because we can't do everything. And certainly I know I can't do everything. I always reach out and ask for help where I can, a bit more often sometimes than I probably need to. So let's go firstly a bit about a historical comparison, because on a personal perspective, I was lucky to be quite some time ago the chief of staff of a multinational brigade of 7,500 troops, NATO operating in Kosovo. And the reason why I mention this today is because if you think of where we are in the operational context today, just think about what was going on then. Peace enforcement and peace support. And we think about what may be happening in the eastern part of Europe at the moment, and where we might need to go into that sort of phase of warfare as a NATO operation, or certainly member countries. Those are very challenging and sometimes forgotten difficulties. How do you leverage? When I was chief of staff there, I needed more to speak to people who are in environmental issues and disease issues. And those are not normal military tasks. We train to bring in artillery and airstrikes. That's normal things. But let's think about those skills we may well need in the NATO family. And the one thing I didn't have at all was multi-domain operations. It was just non-existent. Okay, it was a long time ago. And I know some of you will be thinking, how is this possible? I was 32, and I know I'm older than I look, thank you. But I'm actually 74. So I think the reality is, what we've got to think about with this operation is, what did we learn? Now, if you think about in my office as the chief of staff, and everyone here is military or has served around the NATO sphere, knows there's always an office and you have your PC and some phones. 3 and 3. And actually the phones-wise, I also have my mobile phone. Now, of all of those, you tell me which one was my favorite. You know the answer, it's the bottom one, because it worked. It interoperated with everything. It was pretty faultless. It was tiny. It was a Deutsche Telekom mobile phone. I think the phone bill when I got back, I could have probably bought a car with. But the fact is, it was really important that technology had moved ahead of where the military were. And we had not kept up. That was the big lesson I took away. Second lesson I took away was joining us on that mission as NATO, non-NATO countries participating were Finland and Sweden and Norway. Interesting how times now move on. And we're welcoming some of those countries now into the new into the NATO family. But the reality is those countries also taught me a lot as a typical Brit, thinking I knew everything and our country's fantastic. They had better equipment, it was more up to date, and it talked a lot more to each other than ours did. So again, we had to look around and work out how we can leverage best practice. So maybe that's a theme we can try today as we go on, because the problems we had in Kosovo was trying to get this whole interoperability piece working. And all those lines, and obviously you know that the red being classified, black being unclassified, that's the standard sort of terminology or illustration for those who don't know. But there was multiple lines, multiple complexity. The headquarters, which I had 500 staff, but it was surrounded by spaghetti of cables everywhere. Too much complexity. It's not what we want. So I'll come back to that later. We must not forget the lessons of the past, and we want to drive hard exactly what ACT and others are trying to push us to in industry. We have to get there and get there soon. And how can we do that? I'll talk about that in a moment. So what are the realities today? There's some good things going on. And you know those are going on at the moment, and a lot of stuff is going on in industry-driven and also some great stuff by NATO and the participating countries. But the enemy get a vote as well. And of course, they have a view that they will want to try and use the same technology against us. And we're seeing in Fortinet an increasing amount of leverage of automation against us. The time taken to exploit vulnerabilities is coming right down. It used to be days, now it's a matter of hours. So if everything has to be automated, well, you're going to lose. Therefore, we are meeting reality every day out there in the space, whether you are a NATO interested party or you're an enterprise or you're in government somewhere. So what are those big challenges for NATO? One of the things I want to get across, first point, is please let us not get too concerned. We should be concerned, but not too concerned. Every sector I speak to has the same challenges. Government departments, major banks, everybody has the same challenges. So how can we leverage that reality? Because what I see is that there's an awful lot going on at the moment which often doesn't get seen or met in the military sphere simply by a lack of communication. And we can solve that. Because every one of those customers there you see on the left of Fortinet, we do those things every day, which we're talking about the same challenges above, with all those NATO people and member countries waiting for the same challenge. And too often I hear people saying, but the military's special. I don't think so. As a military person, I loved being in the military. It's a very special place to be. But in terms of the moving data around securely, a lot of people do that. The banks are several years ahead in my estimation. And the reality is they get fined hundreds of thousands of euros if they have one data breach, and they probably get sacked. So it's a pretty compelling reason. So there's an enormous amount of effort going on that, and of course the other industries as well, oil and gas and other high-risk sectors we deal with. So how did Fortinet come into it? Some of you may not have met Fortinet before, I appreciate that, but large company, growing all the time. The reality of most of the technology companies in this space, and certainly the big 3 or 4, are based out of the USA. Just 3 quick graphs to show you the things that are happening at the moment. Certainly from my point of view, the one on the left I like because of a number of reasons, which you'll see some of the sense today, Fortinet are growing very fast. But also the middle one, look at that statistic there, 200 billion threat events neutralized every day. So the bigger you are with your attack surface, the more stuff's going on. And the unique thing about Fortinet with our big threat surface, because we have so many people out there operating our equipment, means we get to see more. And the nice thing that Fortinet did about 15 years ago is we flipped that surface into being the biggest sensor network in the world. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And lastly, we invest heavily, and there's an enormous amount of money going into that investment, which is, of course, something that can never be matched in the military sphere. Why should it? So that investment is already going on. So let's use it. And also, given that high spread of experience in other sectors, especially high-risk sectors, that's what I want to try and bring in, all that experience and knowledge, and make sure that in the military environment, that we use that as much as we can. And we are already with several of the large militaries of the world with ourselves, but also for us to make sure that with our competitors and colleagues in the industry, we all share and collaborate together to make sure everybody is safe. Because this is a common fight of everybody against the other side, the enemy, if you like. But we don't just do technology, we do other things as well. We're particularly proud of it, and I'll touch later because it's something I want you to take away from today about sustainability. The piece on the left there, we are doing an enormous amount. We've taken the lead for 10 years to try and reduce our ecological footprint. We also have the pieces with the cybersecurity skills, and that's something for me very passionate about, to make sure young people, especially the gender balance, we're training a lot of people. Everyone in the industry is doing that, so I'd like to see more of the militaries, and especially NATO as a whole, be able to have one page where you can go there and just find these free training things that are available, because a lot of people are doing it. And it's really good to see when people are using it and getting qualifications. There's also at the bottom there the Fortivets program for those of you in uniform and come towards the end of your career sometimes. Some of you are starting your careers here today. Some of you are towards the end. They make great cybersecurity careers. So those people we're after to go into the industry, not just for Fortinet, for everyone. They make really good cybersecurity people, the awareness, the skills. So we're doing a transition program. And again, other people in our space do that as well. So there's a lot to be done there to try and help those people. But certainly on the collaborative side, on the right, the green there, that's something that I don't think many people see. We collaborate an awful lot, and Jesper's on next from Palo Alto. We have Cisco, Checkpoint, other people who all collaborate together. The Cyber Threat Alliance, the CTA. If you don't know about that, look it up. Great web pages. That's an alliance of all the threat intelligence that serves the community, the intelligence communities of the main nations, but also is fed to all nations to make sure we can keep people safe globally. So it's not something where people hold on to this intel, they share it. And if you think about that's what we're trying to do with MDO, with NATO, to try and share this information so people can pick that information and use it to get that data-driven decision-making faster. So the one thing you want to hear from Fortinet today is about what about the trends and the market drivers? Where are things going? And from our point of view, there are some there on the screen, which many of you will be aware and familiar with some of those things that are happening now. But I'll just single out the fact that there's a lot of study out there and a lot of people don't use it. Fortinet do a big threat report from our FortiGuard labs. There's one just come out in February. And I just wonder how many people look at it. And then if I transform myself into my military career before, everybody was reading the intelligence reports. Everybody. But how many people really take a time and put it in their program to sit down for an hour a week with the coffee and go through not just Fortinet's, but the 2 or 3, 4 really high-grade reports that are out there? We heard last night from Clint at Microsoft with the threat analysis they're doing there, some good stuff. So we should do that. And a great tip I use in the UK is we should empower the young. Think back, I was a very young chief of staff. There's young superstar future commanders here with us today. But also let someone who's junior in the department be in charge of that. Let them brief everyone up once a week. It gives them power, gives them something to be the J2 for the team, the intelligence. But the one thing I think we need to talk about today is how we can reduce that complexity. We have challenges today, and the one thing we have is all of those different places where people are working are now compacting with the challenge of a very complex real estate for IT. And there's now, to most people's view, far too many people and equipment types in the space. And this normally causes a huge drama for IT departments, because if you cannot control all these different systems in a fast way and automate together, there's going to be gaps. And if you imagine that on a military sense, it's a disaster. So we have to try and make sure we fuse these things together, and that's why I want to drive and talk a bit about interoperability. It was mentioned by General Chris Badia there. It's one of the core strategic outcomes there described and wanted by NATO, quite rightly. But I think this is the one we must focus on, because I think without that one, you cannot get the others. Without the interoperability, MDO just won't happen. So we have to focus on this very hard, and we should do that today. And I talk about one thing that allows people to make that leap, and we'll give a case example in a minute, using just one simple but brilliant technology which came in several years ago, secure SD-WAN. If you don't know about it, if you've never met it before, come and speak to us on the stand afterwards. But effectively, and I'll explain a bit about it in a minute, it allows you to move data from one place to another securely whilst leveraging the security systems. And the good news is for people who are Fortinet customers, ours is built into the FortiGate, the biggest selling firewall. It's built in, so you just switch it on. So I'd say to a lot of people, and if you'll go back and have to explain to a lot of people who are not technical, in the old days with this convergence of security and networking together, you used to buy a car, the network, and then you used to put your seatbelts and your brakes, your safety equipment on the car. Well, now you buy the seatbelt and the brakes, and it comes with a free car because SD-WAN provides that connectivity. And this is what's being used by banks and large organizations, health organizations, to transform their estate. So think back to where we were with that operational lessons. We want to make sure we get that convergence right and we don't go back to these multiple lines and channels. And this is what the beauty of secure SD-WAN has done for many people, and it's increasingly now being taken up in the military space, which is great. So in terms of simplicity, all those sectors there on the right-hand side, how would they do it? They would connect everything using their security apparatus, their FortiGates, their firewalls, and they would connect up and transmit and share data using that system, using the cloud. And on the military side, of course, you can actually do it at different levels. And that's, I think, the real beauty of this. And it's being pushed and developed very hard, I know, at the moment in Germany with our team there. Bernd Koenig is here from Germany. Come and speak to Bernd on the stand about what's happening there with the excellent and, I think, leading coalition there, that private partnership, the BWI, between government and industry fused together. So it's an excellent model. But also in the UK, it's happening at the moment to try and get this fusion. And we're looking at whether we can segment at the same channel. You can segment highly classified, classified, and open source material going across the same channel. That's the beauty of it, and that becomes that intelligent data highway, and you can then start to progress things. You can move that across any channel. It could be a satellite link, it could be an internet link, and those sort of pieces. So that convergence, which is what we're trying to get across today, that fusion, is something that NATO can leverage, can bounce through and use. There's no doubt at all, because it's being used and picked up. There's some really good benefits because it actually costs less. That's the beauty of it, because you don't have to have so many boxes and pieces of equipment, certainly in Fortinet's case. But look at some of those advantages there, especially the little graph with the curve there, 65% reduction in problems on the network. Now that's beautiful to hear if you're an IT manager. So meeting reality, what about a case study? Well, one of our European major nation militaries had this big problem, and there it is on the screen. It was actually taking days to transmit through a very secure pipe using the old-fashioned technologies to get a large amount of data from a new platform to go back to various headquarters. So what was happening there is that we transformed it using this SD-WAN capability, and all the information actually goes now over a normal business internet link. That's the real change there. So we can actually try and leverage existing, this is the beauty of it, it doesn't cost any more, existing networks, and you can use the SD-WAN technology. And because it has that simplicity, has a low cost of ownership, it doesn't actually cost that much. So there's a lot of advantages all around, and I'm sure those of people who are looking at the budgets will be seeing you can get more for less. So my recommendations on that secure SD-WAN piece to finish on that is, how can you transform to next generation military highways? Well, the way to do it is to make sure we look and leverage that secure by design piece, and also that number 4, that bottom one. If you stand still in this space, you're dead. So the reality is we have to try and make sure that we talk as industry and the military community more. We really must do. And most of you will be aware of the Fortinet Security Fabric, which is our big overarching integrated piece, which is what provides the drivers for Fortinet and our worldwide security operations. But it's that linking together, that interoperability, which we do with our equipment, which allows the leverage of that security information. Okay, so what I thought to finish off with, I just mention about what next, because I said that in the notes on the abstract to say about we'd put some thoughts together about what's coming next. And there's an awful lot which is coming next. The key bit, which most people know, is about, we talked about it last year, is about this global automated intelligence picture. This feed of intelligence is fed in all the time from anywhere in the world into North America. It's then shared. Don't forget, the critical pieces are shared, as do our colleagues in the industry, in the Cyber Threat Alliance. And the key bit for us is to allow all this information that's flying around, all this data, to be as valuable on the cyber side as it will be on MDO when it arrives in the NATO space. So you can imagine they'll be able to automatically fuse these images and pictures. And my belief is, as long as you get the data highways together, this is the sort of operational picture, let alone the cyber picture, that'll start to be built. There'll be a line of companies lining up to talk about applications that can help sustain the data and use it for military use. So in terms of yourselves, I thought I'd put together a few thoughts about how we can try and study points to try and get ahead. And these may be something, again, try and think about these may be things for your junior staff or someone to try and use. Very soon we'll be able to take away that advantage of stealth and speed, because the level of automation we're becoming now in the security space and the closing of these gaps, that convergence, that ability to come together and fuse things together, closes gaps. Big data is going to be an enormous help for us because we'll be able to leverage that home field advantage. It's already being done by the intelligence community very well in the classified space, but we're able to do that in the cyberspace very well too. Automation is vital, we all know that, but it's something that can also, I'm very passionate about this, offset some of the skills problems. If we're going to automate a lot of things, then we don't necessarily have to worry about everybody having to be a cyber Jedi. The quantum era, it's coming. I'm also the co-chair of the Tech UK, which is the UK advisory body for government. It's a quantum working group. There's an enormous amount going on in the quantum space. I am not a quantum physicist. I'm an infantryman. Okay, so it's not something you have to be some sort of ninja about quantum. You just have to understand what it is. In simple terms, the keys are changing, and they're going to change drastically. And we need to be aware of what that means for us and also the threat. So the quantum era, we need to know about it. And also the ability to balance in procurement decisions the value engineering and the new technology. We have to make sure we look up, out, and look at those other high-risk sectors, see what's going on out there. Can we save some money? Can we get less for more? The last bit is really important about sustainability as well, and the total cost of ownership, because we mentioned about the melting ice caps a minute ago with the question there. But we all need to do our part on this, and I want to make sure we do our part on it, and Fortinet certainly does. We're a very sustainable company. We actually walk the walk, and so we make sure we do these things. But there's some very interesting things when you go into the sustainability space. Busy slide, but we have very powerful processes. That's good. But also, if you look at the slide and there's the top box and the bottom box, the top box is for the high-end appliances and the normal ones at the bottom. But look at the increase in power over the average rating in terms of processing power, but much less power use. Much less power use. And certainly in the public sector space, we're finding there's an awful lot of cost savings being mopped up by very grateful financial directors and financial officers because they suddenly realize they don't need to cool so much, they don't need to have so much power, the space of data rooms is reduced as well. So there's an enormous amount of advantages in the sustainability piece. So I think that's something going forwards, it's here to stay. And I'll be very surprised if next year on SciComm we haven't got talks about sustainability in IT, because it's a subject which is now coming very much into the industry, and I would urge us all to take a real interest in it. So let's summarize and see where we're at. To make sure we conclude, how can we get all this lever, this great information and use and advanced success from the other high-risk sectors beyond just the military space? How can we help that? And will that help us meet reality? We've talked about secure SD-WAN. It allows that convergence. That's something that we really want to try and help that leap forward in interoperability. I think also the next generation technology piece is dealing already with a 24/7 threat. So we need to work out how can we leverage that and just simply use it, buy it. Because what we want to do is save time so we can do the things to action the threat intelligence and work out how we can do that faster. That's a big part of it, all military operations, to close that OODA loop. But technology is, of course, as we all know, not the only issue. It's the issue which is there, but also people have to adapt. And this is one of the challenges I have. Most of us in the room are of a certain age and genre, but there's an awful lot of people who are at the younger end of the market. If we go on operations, it's always the young who deliver fantastically. So we need to allow and empower the younger people, because they're going to own it, to go and deliver this piece, ask their opinions. They're normally more informed than we actually think. So let's make sure we're empowering the younger people, ask them to take on the new technologies and challenges. They're always more adaptable because just the function of ourselves as we get older. And the sustainability piece, I think, is really important to make sure that we can concentrate on that. We've mentioned quantum, but sustainability is not going away. So I hope we can benefit from other high-risk sectors. I think there's hopefully some takeaways there of look at some of the technology types that are transforming the banking and other high-risk sectors, but make sure we do with that meet reality piece. We look over the fence, we talk and communicate more. And that's my last challenge, really. It's just to mention that I had this piece we're doing in the UK, and it's gone very well. And I've had a discussion with some people in the room about it already. I think NATO would benefit from an industry working group approach where there's a collaborative approach. This is not to drive sales. This is to drive interoperability, because it's in everybody's interest to make sure you have common standards, common interoperability, an open ecosystem. Things can plug in simply. The connectability. What about the standards for power use, sustainability standards? If we have a common understanding, people can go away in industry and make things to match those standards. But we don't want standoffs, we want working groups together. So there's a challenge there too. If you feel you can help me with that quest, and you're here from industry today, come and speak, and we'll see if we can put a proposal today. This is part of what we do here at SciCon to see how we can help move things forward. Can we get that industry body together and assist NATO? Because I'm pretty sure NATO will be delighted to have as much help as they can get. Thank you very much.
So if I understand correctly, you're willing to take some questions?
Happy if there's a question.
Yeah, please. Can you stand up so she can give you the microphone, please? Yes.
There we go.
Thanks for an amazing presentation. It's been really interesting information. Quick question. As now the COVID-19 is already officially done, what do you see that as a challenges for the new era? Because it's going to be a mix of the work from home, work from office. Do you see the challenge for the cybersecurity and for the Fortinet as the company? Like, what's the plan for that?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? And I know in the military space, it's even more acute, isn't it? Because people have now had to work from home. And of course, the military way is to get everyone together, which is quite right. Enterprise faces those challenges. The key thing is to make sure that the home space is exactly the same and secure as the workspace. And that has already happened. So now you can work just as safely from home in all the high-risk sectors and the military, should you wish to, using certain systems to make sure you can leverage some of that technology we talked about today. So the first thing, we can do that. I think there are challenges, though, definitely on the human factors. We've said that. We've even seen it in the industry, that there's a challenge if you're a younger person to learn anything if you're sat at home in a bedroom. So I think there's that challenge. In terms of the wider threats and challenges, I still think we've got the big Russia issue, which is there mentioned, the Chinese issue, which has been covered yesterday, the threat analysis piece. I still believe there's a challenge for us as a world community also to actually do what this whole thing has taught us, to talk more, to interact more, get together more, because people who talk together and share issues normally solve them. So I think the big lesson is not to go back into old bad habits, but actually get together and fuse more. I was hearing from one major nation in Europe yesterday that they've transformed their procurement process because of the pandemic. And their procurement, which used to take anything between a year to 12 years for certain military items, has something's been achieved in 6 weeks recently. Fast tracking. Major purchase of normal major military equipment, not IT. So there's ways you can do this stuff if you want to transform, and I think the pandemic taught us that. So I think there's some pieces there, the skills, the homeworking, but also the procurement things have to change. And I think most people in the room know what that means with the IT space. We have to take some risk, and we have to be prepared to spend some pilot funds, which has been mentioned about Diana funding and other funding available, use those to take some risk. If it goes wrong, okay, that's life. Because in IT, things sometimes go wrong in that development stage and you have to reload and go again. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I think we're done.
I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Small talk of you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you.